He was once the loudest man in the ring, a towering figure whose glare could silence a crowd. But behind the strength and swagger, George Tyrus Murdoch carried a loneliness he never spoke about. For years, he played the role of the invincible giant, the wrestler, the commentator, the man who never broke. Yet in the quiet corners of his life, he was searching for something far simpler: peace, family, and forgiveness. When he finally found it, it wasn't in fame, fortune, or victory. It was in the heart of a woman who had already fought her own battles and won. Tyrus's story begins long before Fox News or WWE arenas, long before the bright lights and roaring crowds. It begins with a boy who never belonged, a man who had to fight for identity, and a lifetime spent turning pain into performance. A childhood between worlds. Born on February 21st, 1973 in Boston, Massachusetts, George Timothy Murdoch grew up between two worlds, black and white, but belonged to neither. As a biracial child, he never felt fully accepted. His mother's home rejected him for his color, and his father's world wasn't much kinder. That early rejection left a wound that never healed, a quiet ache that fueled both his ambition and his anger. He learned quickly that if the world wouldn't protect him, his body would. By the time he reached college, he was a powerhouse on the football field for the Lopers at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. He dreamed of becoming a teacher, but a ruptured appendix changed everything. Surgery severed nerves in his leg, leaving him with a limp and ending his sports dreams. For the first time, the man who would one day command millions was left broken, confused, and afraid. Wrestling, the pain that became performance. When wrestling entered his life in the early 2000s, it wasn't glamour, it was survival. He signed with WWE in 2006 under the ring name Gila and began climbing the brutal hierarchy of developmental leagues. In those years, he learned to turn pain into performance, to smile while bleeding, and to entertain while aching. By 2010, he returned to WWE as Brodus Clay, a name inspired by rapper Snoop Dogg, for whom he once worked as a bodyguard. To the public, it was just another stage persona. To Tyrus, it was a mask, a way to hide the chaos inside. His transformation into the Funkasaurus in 2012 was meant to be redemption, a colorful character designed to make fans smile. But behind the curtain, the man was tired. Tired of pretending he was okay, tired of turning pain into entertainment. Release, reinvention, and the return of the fighter. When WWE released him in 2014, Tyrus stood alone again, 37 years old, limping, broken, and without a clear path forward. Still, he refused to stop. He moved into total non-stop action wrestling, reinventing himself once more as Tyrus, a brutal, unforgiving fighter who worked as a fixer for hire. It was a character that felt uncomfortably close to his real life, a man doing whatever it took to survive. And survive he did. By 2021, he dominated the National Wrestling Alliance, winning the World Television Championship and then the World Heavyweight title a year later. But each victory left him emptier. He had the belts, the fame, and the fans. Yet when the crowd went home, silence always waited. The wins didn't fill the void. The loneliness remained. The woman who saw the man. Then came the woman who would change everything, Ingrid Rink. She didn't need to see the giant in the ring. She saw the man limping off it. Born on April 24th, 1981, Ingrid had already fought her own battles long before meeting Tyrus. At 15, she walked into her first fitness class and found a lifeline. By 16, she was teaching classes, not because it was easy, but because it gave her control in a world that often felt unstable. She faced heartbreak, financial strain, and the challenges of raising children largely on her own. But her biggest test came when her son, Rock, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Overnight, her life shifted from fitness to survival. Instead of collapsing, she built Sensible Meals, a meal prep company born from necessity and love. Her rebirth, strength through survival. Ingrid's transformation was not only emotional, it was physical. As she helped others manage their health, she lost 150 pounds herself, redefining her life in the process. She became a symbol of self-made strength, proof that a woman could rebuild herself from the ground up. Yet even with her success, she still sought peace. By the time she met Tyrus around 2014, she had built businesses, raised children, and lost pieces of herself along the way. Tyrus was a man with walls of iron. Ingrid was a woman who knew how to climb them. Together, they didn't find perfection, they found balance. He taught her to slow down. She taught him how to heal. Their bond grew slowly, built on trust, patience, and shared silence. It wasn't fireworks, it was a steady flame, a family forged from pain. By 2014, their bond had become unshakable. They welcomed their daughter, Georgie Rose, in May, and everything shifted. For the first time, Tyrus, the man who had fought for applause, found purpose in his child's laughter. Ingrid had already proven herself as a businesswoman and mother, but watching Tyrus transform into a father softened her world in ways she hadn't expected. Together, they built a modern, blended family, merging children from past relationships into one unit. It wasn't always easy. Schedules clashed, emotions flared, and fame complicated privacy. But they stayed united. In 2020, the world paused under lockdown. For Tyrus, it was the first time he could slow down. Away from cameras and commentary desks, he realized he didn't want to face life without her. The proposal that changed everything that spring. During the uncertainty of the pandemic, he surprised Ingrid with an emerald engagement ring. It wasn't lavish or staged, it was intimate and real. Married for years but never officially proposed to, he later wrote that she was his everything. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise that the fighter had finally found his peace. They waited 4 years to make it official, not because of doubt, but because they were already living like husband and wife. On January 6th, 2024, they married quietly without spectacle, surrounded by love, children, and hard-earned peace. The ceremony wasn't a public performance. It was a quiet victory. It was the moment when the man who once fought to be seen finally chose to be seen for who he truly was. A new life on the farm. After a decade of noise, 2024 brought a quiet revolution. Months after their wedding, Tyrus and Ingrid left Louisiana and moved to a sprawling farm in northern New Jersey. It wasn't about wealth or luxury, it was about healing. For Tyrus, the farm became the one place where fame didn't exist. For Ingrid, it was a chance to start over and rebrand her business away from the name she no longer wished to carry. "I don't ever want to be attached to a rink again," she said, calling it growth rather than bitterness. Their home became a sanctuary. Early mornings, homemade meals, and watching Georgie ride horses under open skies replaced the roar of the arena. Their home grew into a menagerie of animals: snakes, turtles, lizards, chameleons, exotic fish, known affectionately as the Tyrus Zilla Zoo. In the balance between order and chaos, they found peace. The storm, they survived. But even in peace, storms come. In 2019, while Tyrus's career at Fox News was rising, his world was shattered by accusations of sexual harassment from former co-host Britt McHenry. Headlines turned venomous overnight, and the story reached far beyond the screen. Fox News said the matter was investigated and resolved, but McHenry filed a lawsuit months later. Though the case was dismissed in 2021 with an undisclosed settlement, the damage remained. Public scrutiny didn't just target Tyrus, it reached Ingrid and their children. She stayed silent until 2022 when she finally spoke, writing that her family's trauma was too much to share. But she added that Tyrus became an even stronger leader for his family. Behind the words were therapy sessions, quiet breakdowns, and the painful work of rebuilding trust in a world that thrives on destruction. Outro: the man who learned to be still. By 2023, Tyrus did what few men in his world ever manage. He walked away on his own terms. At the NWA's 75th anniversary show, he faced EC3 in a brutal bull rope match. The stakes were clear. If he lost, he would retire. When the final count came, he didn't protest. He simply nodded and said goodbye. In that moment, he realized he had nothing left to prove. His legacy wasn't in titles or belts, it was waiting at home. Retirement didn't mean silence. He continued his work as a commentator and author, releasing Just Tyrus and Enough Seed, both testaments to the raw, unfiltered man behind the spotlight. But in the spaces between public moments, he became something he'd never truly been before. Present. He watched Georgie ride, supported his son's dreams, and stood beside Ingrid as she rebuilt her life from scratch. At 51, Tyrus finally understood. Strength isn't power, it's the courage to sit still, forgive the past, and choose love over pride. The loudest man in the ring had finally found the quiet that felt like home.